All right. So we got industrialization. We got old versus new. Let's go ahead then. Got to talk a little bit about this. Oh, by the way, what disease? What anybody know what disease? Yep. Queen Victoria is a carrier of hemophilia, and so all of them there were carriers, including her, who's married to Tsar Nicholas II. So we mentioned I think right in the bell rang we mentioned the Kaiser's withered arm.
Yes.
And he's going to spend his entire life trying to compensate for this. Now, he wasn't quite a total autocratic leader. The Kaiser, what does Kaiser mean? Emperor comes from Caesar. Tsar comes from Caesar. It's just German for Caesar. Emperor. Germany. So he's the emperor of Germany. And Germany had a parliament called the Reichstag, but the parliament had limited power. He got a chosen head of state called the chancellor. The king did. The king controlled foreign policy in the army. And so spilled there. Okay, so the king had the power over the army, or the emperor did, and the thing is that Kaisers, like all monarchs, had to be warriors. They had to be warrior kings. He had to go to a military academy, and he would have to be trained to be a warrior, but a warrior with essentially one arm. And so he was brutally mistreated as a young boy to toughen him up to compensate for this. He was weak because of this. And so for his whole life, he would be compensating for this. His entire life. And he wanted to prove he was tough. And so to give you an idea how insecure this made him, combined with the fact that from day one, he's treated as an emperor, at the same time being browbeaten because he's not strong enough, how this would affect him and make him so insecure, he would work on his right arm until it became incredibly powerful. He would work. What he would do is to take a double-edged sword or double-edged axe and chop wood for hours. One arm, chop wood. You ever chop wood? You know how hard that would be with one arm. And he grew that just incredibly strong. So then he would do things that show you. Well, let me give you an idea. He would meet foreign dignitaries, come in and would shake their hand, and somebody would just shake their hand, fine, whatever. Somebody would shake and grab it. Squeeze and squeeze as hard as he could and hold on to it and like be carrying on to their conversations as they go to their knees in agony because he would squeeze it so hard, breaking knuckles sometimes. That's not normal. And he's the man with the strongest arm in the world. And so he's constantly trying to prove it. So he was jealous of his grandmothers and then uncles, Navy, Britain. He was jealous of everything, jealous of their empire in Europe. He wanted to prove he was strong, and so he was desperate to do this. Whenever they would do war games, his side had to win. Which just kind of defeats the purpose of having a war game or prepare for war. And he now has the strongest army in Europe, and insecure and convinced that everyone is mocking him. Now, the last 10 years, he had been kind of toned down basically because he got kind of bored, but he still represented Germany, dynamic, terrifying, and threatening to so many people. At the same time, his cousin, Tsar Nicholas II, Tsar Nicholas II of Russia. Now, he was a full autocrat. There was a parliament called the Duma, but they had absolutely no power at all. And he controlled the state. And he was totally ill-prepared to be czar, took over like his cousin, Kaiser Wilhelm II, at a very young age. His first cousin was also going to be king of England. And his wife was Queen Victoria's niece and a carrier of hemophilia. But after Catherine the Great, the Tsar of Russia had to be a man. The noblemen ruled, the boyars made a change in their traditional line of succession to say only men. And the number one job of a monarch is to have an heir. You have to have an heir. And he had 4 daughters. And none of them could be Tsar. And the thing about it was, as this man who was ill-prepared, not very sharp, indecisive, could be browbeaten and bullied, at least he let out that opinion, was also, in Russia, a god on earth. How could a god on earth not have a male heir? I mean, that was seen as really something wrong with him. And then finally they had a son, Alexei. And he had hemophilia. Now, what does hemophilia do?
It improves the cholesterol.
Not quite.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't clot. Now, it's not, if it's a cut, that can be bad. But that's not the bad part about hemophilia. It's not a cut, it's a bruise. Because that's internal bleeding. And there's no, cut you can press and hold, but internally. And like for example, just a small bruise on his arm would swell up 4 or 5 times the size of his arm and hurt so bad. The pain would be awful. But higher up here, near the heart and the stomach, could kill him. Because the blood would begin to, it would hurt, but also begin to infect. And it was a nightmare. And so they had to do everything they could to try to keep him from just like running and playing because he felt like it could kill him. And whenever he would fall, he'd be in agony. But they didn't let anybody know because they didn't want people to know that the god on earth, the Tsar, could have a son like this. So nobody knew about how terrified they were all the time. The only person who seemed to help, we brought in when Alexei was about 10 years old, was a Orthodox monk, kind of made himself a monk, from Siberia named Rasputin. And Rasputin's presence seemed to bring comfort to Alexei. Nobody knows exactly why, but there were a couple different times he was hurt, and when he came in there, he comforted him and he felt better. And so they allowed him into the inner circle, and soon he is dispensing advice, sometimes good, sometimes bad. That's not even the point. The point is nobody knew why he was there. Yet at night in St. Petersburg, he would go out and drink more than anybody else, carouse more, and no one could figure out why this horrible man was so close to the Tsar. And it just seemed to show that the Tsar was corrupt at a time where there are people all over Russia and every place else demanding more rights, demanding their voice in government, demanding democracy. As they are aggressively entering the 20th century, Russia just appeared to be corrupt, personified by Rasputin. Now, Rasputin actually tried to convince the Tsar, don't mobilize your army and go to war. So he was right, but no one saw it that way. We will come back to Rasputin, but he was an example of the corruption and trying to hold on to the old. And nobody could figure out why he was there in St. Petersburg. By the way, that's the Tsar and his cousin, King George V.
Is he blind?
No, it's just because the picture looked that way. The black and white, no, he wasn't. But it almost like there's a film of that one. I've noticed that too. But George, yeah. Remember what I told you, cousins marrying cousins, you're stuck with what you get. And so imperialism. The next big thing are all these goals for imperial power. Imperial empire to suck up resources. Remember mercantilism from the areas they take. But it's also a source of prestige. Look at our empire. And so much of the world, from the Russian Empire, the Chinese Empire up until 1911. The U.S. in many ways was an empire, and obviously was by 1914. All these empires, and there's constant wars for empire. We already talked about all those wars for empire that led to the United States, or the American Revolution, which itself was a war for empire. And Europe itself was full of empires. Look at Central Europe. 3 massive empires: Russia, Austria, Germany. And like, for example, there was no Poland at this time. Poland was split between Austria, Germany, and Russia. And there are all these places that were parts of empires. And this multicultural, massive empires, especially the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Russian Empire, and you can see down here the Ottoman Empire too. In fact, all these areas here had just become independent in the 100 years, all this, 100 years before the war, winning their independence in really bloody fights with the Ottoman Empire. And Africa is a classic example of that. In 1860, almost all of Africa, so we're not doing our map, but almost all of Africa was colonized or taken by Europeans. Only two places. Do you remember the American Colonization Society? What country did they create?
Nigeria.
Yeah, but that one's kind of a weird, it's almost colonial. Anybody know the only other country that was not colonized? Yeah, Italy tried in 1896, as you can see from this piece of paper right here. Italy tried, and the Ethiopians defeated them. Italy never quite got over that one. But by 1914, red, or that kind of, whatever, it's kind of red. Britain, France, Germany, the Cameroons, East and West, Southwest Africa. Belgium had the massive Congo. It used to be owned a colony of one person, their king, King Leopold, brutally occupied there. But this whole thing about, look how big our empire was and the prestige of that. And that desire for empire is going to lead or help contribute to number 4, nationalism. And nationalism is key. Arguably, this is one of the biggest causes of the war. Maybe the biggest, but hard to get. It goes hand in hand with militarism. But this concept of a national entity, something, identity, something about you, either defines your country or if you want to be a country. Now, nationalism as we know it did not exist till the French Revolution. We saw elements of it, like proto-nationalism in the American Revolution and other things, but nationalism, the French Revolution, and then the 19th century. It's all a relatively new thing. It's no coincidence. Nationalism, industrial revolution go hand in hand. The U.S. nationalism began after the War of 1812 when the Industrial Revolution began. And citizens of the United States start calling themselves Americans. To have mentioned this before, it's that intense devotion to your state. Why are you devoted to your state? Because it's your state. It, of course, for some people, could be more complex. Now, when people say patriotism today, what they really mean is nationalism. Patriotism is love of your country for what it stands for, what it represents. Nationalism, love for your country. And you can imagine how this can be manipulated time after time in every nationalistic country, including obviously the United States. But what if you don't have independence? What if you have an ethnic group, a national group, something that holds you by identity, this desire for political independence? And usually it's ethnic groups, language would be one of the biggest ones. And here are the different, these are nations, but all the different ethnic groups based on language. For example, before World War I, there was no Ukraine. I don't know where White Russians came from in the English translation, but that's Belarus. There's Estonian, Latvians, Lithuanians, Poles, Slovaks, many Croats, Serbs, Slovenians, Bosnians did not have their own state. And they wanted their own state. They're divided up by language or some kind of ethnic group. Nobody felt more mistreated and felt without self-determination to decide this, we're jumping right here, than the Slavs. And the concept of pan-Slavism. Pan-Slavism. A desire for a Slavic state. So Slavs are Eastern and Central Europeans, and this idea of a Slavic nationalist state. Now, there are some who want like one big Slavic state, but there are many different types of Slavs. Poles are Slavs. Croats are Slavs. Slovenians are Slavs. Bosnians, Serbians are Slavs. Anybody know the biggest Slavic nation? Yeah, Russia. They're all different ethnic groups amongst the Slavs. one of the largest population of Slavs in this huge multiracial, multicultural, multi-ethnic empire was Austria-Hungary. Austria-Hungary is this. For years it was Austria. There was a revolution in Hungary, 1867. And they basically said, okay, it'll be a dual monarchy. The Emperor of Austria is also the King of Hungary. So it's a dual monarch with the same monarch. It's complex, and they've always had this problem. Those are the major ethnic groups in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So Austrians are ethnically German, German speakers, and those are the ones in red. So they were never part of a Germany. There was no Germany. They were just ethnically German, German speakers, all for various reasons. These are Hungarians, and then almost everybody else. Oh, and these are Bohemians and Moravians, and then everybody else is Slavs. Polish, Ukrainians, Romanians, all the different Serbian, Bosnian, Croatia, etc. Oh, and then it's a big hunk of Italians. And these areas more and more wanted to be independent, either more self-rule within the Austro-Hungarian Empire or more break away and form their own country. And Austria is desperately trying to hold on to this. And so they're in the way of Slavic nationalism. They're in the way. Especially when they occupied this in 1908 and took it. Russia was for this. And so that leads, almost forgot. So right here is the country of Serbia, a Slavic nation. And they try to get people to believe that they're going to represent all the Slavic people and make a giant Slavic state under the Serbian king, Greater Serbia. They thought all of this region. And who's in their way? Austria. So Austria and Serbia are going to become enemies. Now, Austria is relatively strong, even though they're weakening now. And so this will be the conflict. Serbs are trying to find ways to get the Slavs in the Austrian Empire to rise up. Maybe have their own civil war, especially in places like Bosnia. By the way, remember what Serbia looked like on that picture I showed you on Friday? Look at Serbia. Go back. We're going to go back the slow way. Remember the pig? Doesn't it kind of look like a pig? It kind of has a snout, doesn't it? So Greater Serbia. Now, Russia actually didn't particularly like Serbia, but they didn't like Austria. And they were mad at Austria for various things. And Russia had been wanting, if anything about Russian history, they've been wanting this for 300 years. They fought many major wars with the Turks over Istanbul. And so Russia saw themselves as the protector of the Slavs and therefore the protector of Serbia. Don't think of it as an ironclad alliance, but what is an ironclad alliance anyways? It's just something that states decide to do for political reasons. But they're trying to say to Austria, no more pushing into this area. Austria is kind of pushing in, doubling down on their empire. Now, Austria has only one ally, real ally. And they're stuck together. Germany and Austria. That's it. That's the only ally Austria has. In fact, Germany feels like they have no choice but to defend Austria because it's their only ally. And Austria is trying to hold on to this multi-ethnic empire that's falling apart. So Germany is there. And so there's now this conflict then over this area here. This peninsula is called the Balkans. And this fight, they've been talking about this since the Ottoman Empire was driven out, so 1870s. So you can see, and that's why I had to do those maps, look how much the map of Europe is going to change. there would eventually be a greater Serbia. Do you see it? Yeah, that's Yugoslavia. Technically, Serbia still calls itself Yugoslavia, but it's Serbia. They're gonna create this country. All these different ethnic groups will be together in one country in the 1990s. It'll blow up in a terribly bloody civil war. Unbelievably bloody. So another version of this nationalism, and it should remind you a little bit of another country's German nationalism. German nationalism. Germany was created in 1871. So there was no German state. 1871. And the goal of this was to create a common identity. A common identity. Because this is actually a picture of Germany once it became an empire. All these different places are independent states and principalities. Heck, in the 18th century, there are over 500 little Germanic states. Some no bigger in a town, some huge like Prussia or Bavaria. And the thing about it is yeah, they speak German, but there are big differences. Lower German is a much different dialect than Upper German. It's all by elevation. And, well, so my sister-in-law married a Berliner, and we were there, this is years ago. We went with them, went to a few places, ended up in Munich. And I remember him telling me, he's from Berlin. He said, those people in Munich, they're not real Germans. They're not real Germans. They're not real. And then I was told by people in Munich, those people in Berlin, they're not real Germans. And they're ethnically different. They speak a little bit different. The diet's a little bit different. I mean, they feel like different areas. How do you unify all these little, used to be independent states into one? They made up an identity. They made up a German ancestry that every German could somehow hold on to. Oh, sure, we might be different in Westphalia than Brandenburg, but we're all Germans together. So they created this mythology of the beginning of the Germans, of the combination of noble horsemen from the plains, mixing with people who live there, creating this people that are more cultured, more intelligent, the best scientists, the greatest philosophers, the greatest politicians, and the greatest soldiers. And they dubbed this culture, German culture. Now this is all created from various they took Norse myths, they took Germanic myths, a little bit of Roman, they just kind of threw a bunch of stuff together and made up stuff. And said, sure, we might be different in different parts of Germany, but we're all Germans together. So this statue is on the Rhine River, and it's Germania, this great symbol, this huge statue of a place called Koblenz. And in World War I, they gave these medals out to soldiers, all kinds of them. And there's various different versions of them about culture. And our culture is superior, and everybody is jealous. And therefore, we are surrounded by potential enemies. They want to weaken us and take what makes us great. And if they can't take what makes us great, then they'll destroy it. And so they could tie it together as saying, we are exceptional. We are exceptional as Germans, and everybody is jealous. Exceptional, like it's our own continent. No, wait, that's another country. There's a lot of similarities created from whole cloth mythology in the United States and Germany at this time. We're Americans, it's our continent. It's a similar thing. All created from whole cloth. And so they made up that we have this common ancestry. And don't forget, this was at a time of racial science, all the different races. And we talked about this in class. It's the philosophy that says there's national hierarchism, social Darwinism. Our Germanic race must be on top. Could we ever allow the Germanic race to be impurified, to be mixed? They even came up with a name. They stole a name and said that we are ancestors from this common German ancestry called what? Aryans. And we must preserve the Aryans. So this is 1880s, 1890s, just made up from whole cloth. So here's a postcard. You can tell German wars because they put down the date of the war when it starts in 1914. And this was given to little kids. And they would write little notes saying, you know, protect our culture and send it to German soldiers at the front. And so you see the German, those little kids, and everyone's attacking them because they're jealous. So these represent little caricatures of all other countries. What country is this? That's France. US. Yeah, Russia. Vague China. It's just like Asia. So Great Britain. Vague Arabia. Italy. Vague Africa. And everyone's jealous and wants to get them. Now, Aryans, there's a little bit of Indo-European, Indo-Asian horsemen, which were the Vandals of the Gauls, whatever they might be. But anybody know the country of Aryans? There's actually a country of Aryans. So what'd you say? Norway? That shows you how successful German mythology had been. You immediately think that area for Aryans. This is all made up. It's called Iran. Iran means Aryan. But that shows you how successful it is. It's hard not to think that because everyone talks about certain characteristics of people who live in areas without much sun for a lot of the year. And I understand. That shows you how successful German mythology has been. And this was just like most of these kind of national identity things, just purely made up. So if people think about this and they associate this, and I understand why, with what's going to come about with the National Socialists, with Nazi Germany, whose mortal enemy were socialists. That's another story. No. And people think it associates with that. No, they didn't make this up. They just said, we're the real preservers of Aryans. We're the real ones. And just followed on this mythology that was already created. France had a similar thing, almost intense to the point of suicidal obsession with two territories they lost in 1871 in the Franco-Prussian War. The lost provinces are Alsace and Lorraine. And France geared their entire nation towards getting this area back. And France, even though they're only about 2/3 the population of Germany, is going to commit almost all the resources to take that back. And so you have this combination of Germany, who is telling their people, everyone hates you, they're coming to get you because we're the best. And France, who is saying, our entire goal in our society must be to take that back, which means war with Germany. And so this is just brewing. And you can imagine how politicians will take advantage of this in this new kind of mass democracy. And that leads directly to number 5. Alliances and militarism. So starting with alliances, there are 5 great powers in Europe. No one country is overly powerful, even though Germany is probably the closest to an all-powerful state, but not quite. They have the strongest army. Britain has by far the strongest fleet. France is pretty close. Russia isn't quite industrialized enough. Austria is weakening because of this multicultural area, multi-ethnic area, and wanting independence. Italy really wanted to be great power. They tried to act like it. They weren't. Italy was a brand new country too. And they were bitterly divided north and south. Go to Italy sometime. It's like 3 different countries. Here, and here. It's really wild. And the food, not that good. I'm kidding. It's amazing. It's so good. Maybe I'll tell you my Italy stories. But no one country. Now, why do countries get alliances? They want alliances for peace. They want to deter attacks. Don't attack me, I have friends. That's why countries have alliances. Everyone got that? You don't make alliances because you want war, unless you're psychotic. You make alliances because you want peace. Don't attack me, I have friends. And so everyone's getting these alliances. The problem is, what if somebody does attack you? And then your friends come to your aid. Wars everywhere. So there are major problems with alliances. That's why Britain always stayed out of alliances. The 2 main alliances. The first one, the Triple Alliance. The Triple Alliance was basically this: Germany and Austria. Germany and Austria are stuck together. Germany's by far the most powerful one of these countries now. I know it's triple these three, don't worry. But they're stuck together. In fact, by 1916, Germany is going to feel like we have to prop Austria up, and they're going to call being allied to Austria as being shackled to a corpse. They have no choice. And then you'll notice Italy is also in red. Italy joined this alliance, a defensive alliance, even though they hate Austria. They joined it because of colonial reasons against France and Britain in the Mediterranean. So Italy joined it, but they were never a strong ally. You see this little finger of land right here? Austria wants, Austria has it, and Italy says it's ours. Italy also claimed all this. It's called the Dalmatian coast. And so Italy was a member, but to be honest, Germany never really thought Italy would join because of Austria. And it turned out Italy would be a bad ally. They not only did not join the war when the war began, but in 1915, Italy declared war on Austria and Germany. I don't know, maybe you can write this one down. If your ally attacks you, bad ally. I mean, that's one, you might need to reinforce that one. Let's get to the other alliance, the Triple Entente. The Triple Entente is really a dual alliance between Republic of France and the Emperor of Russia, the Empire of Russia. They would not be allies except for one simple reason. They fear Germany. So they're allies. And they have an ironclad alliance. But Entente means understanding. So you'll notice Britain here. So everyone got that, Britain? And by the way, I didn't write that on here. That's your job to write that on here. To write down the Triple Entente. Are these three countries? The Triple Alliance are these three countries. We can all look at this, and whether or not you're listening or not, and you all have great memories, but you will all forget it too. That's why we write things down. So, if you write down just one word, that would be the kind of, those we get as the next essay test. I'll get mediocre answers, and you're better. But back to this. Britain, they had fought France all the time. They didn't like each other. But, and them and Russia nearly went to war over Central Asia. It's called the Great Game. Colonial wars for empire. But as Germany became more and more powerful, Britain went from being actually close to being an ally with Britain became an ally with Germany, to being closer to France because of German strength. And finally, in 1907, they would sign an understanding with France, and France convinced them, Russia's not horrible. We both don't like Germany. Now, it wasn't an alliance. It never said that Britain would come to the aid of France. It was more like Britain would defend this coast and do a few other things. But once it opened that door, Britain and France are now closer than ever before, even though they don't like each other. France has never forgiven Britain for liberating them in World War II. It's never forgiven them. Why did it have to be the British? Then we have to get two more quick alliances. Oh, three more. First time, we already know who's Russia, the protector of what country? Serbia. They hate Austria, so Serbia. One more, next one. Britain and Japan are still allies. That goes back to the Russia. So we got Britain, Japan, Russia, Serbia. One more place. See Belgium? Belgium was independent. Well, sorry, was neutral. It became independent in 1830. All the great powers guaranteed Belgium neutrality, but only one country thought it was in their national interest to keep Belgium neutral. Britain. They couldn't tolerate German forces now being 40 miles away. The Royal Navy was a lot stronger than the German Navy, but the German Navy was catching, and the Germans had the strongest army in the world. Could they dash the 40 miles here? That's a lot further away. And to the British point of view, Belgium has got to remain neutral, which of course, France wanted it neutral too, as a buffer zone. So these are the alliances. Now, all alliances are what post-war politics said. Countries don't have to go to war, but they've all made these commitments as the idea to avoid war. But when war comes, I think you see what's going to happen. But also the militarism of this time, there's a massive arms race going on. As every country begins to build up bigger and bigger armies. And these are French. Oh, what color uniform are the French wearing? Yeah, they're wearing blue. Everybody was starting to wear dull colors because they needed camouflage because of the new weapons. But the French want to prove their courage, and so they refuse to change. And so the French wore navy blue and red pants. Everybody else wore, for example, that's pretty close to the Russian, gray, that's steel gray. Slightly darker, that'd be the German. Khaki. Who really has khaki? This is too green. But khakis with the British, the Americans wore. The Italians would wear, eventually wear khaki. But the French wore red pants, navy blue top. In 1916, they went to light blue. Courage. We will not run away. The poor French soldiers. Incredible courage. Their leaders. Wait till the next war. Okay, they had mass armies. Everybody had, the French always fought with incredible courage. Their soldiers. Their leaders. Whew, some good, some bad. They start making bigger and bigger armies. As the population grew bigger, there was an incentive to get bigger and bigger. How did they do this? They achieved it through, we call it the draft, they call it conscription. Conscription. Everybody will draft huge armies. Now, how do they do this? Everyone copied the German model. Everybody. Every young man in Germany, every young man, when they turn 19, they're in the army for a year. They drill, they train, they're in the army. That's called the standing army. And then they will recruit some soldiers to stay in the army to become professional soldiers, sergeants, basically. They would also go into secondary education and recruit young men to become officers in the army. That's the professional army, the draftee, 1 year. But then for the next 20 years, they are in the reserves. Next 20 years. Once or twice a month, they will drill. And then for 2 weeks every summer, a mass drill. And so that means you could have a standing army like Germany did of about 700,000 men. Yet in a week can have 4.5 million men in uniform. Now you don't want to do that very often because who's going to be in the factories? Who's going to be in the farms? But if they need to, they can do that. And once Germany started doing that, every country would do it. Germany did it the best. And so soon we're having huge armies. One European power did not do this. They did not have the draft. Britain. Britain had a tiny army compared to everybody else. Tiny, but a huge navy. But the new technology would also dramatically change war, especially artillery. The new artillery would be the most potent weapon of war. High explosive shells that can fire 12, 15 miles away. The French, these are French 75 millimeter. That is a German 155 millimeter. That's another German weapon. And these high explosive shells would be the most important weapons. 90% of all the casualties in World War I were caused by artillery. Artillery. And today, artillery is still the most important weapon of war. The most important weapon in the war between Ukraine and Russia is artillery. And Russia has shells and Ukraine's running out. And that's how come Russia right now is kind of winning. Ukraine's out of ammunition. It's artillery. The exploding shells. What do they call it when the shells break up into pieces? Yeah, shrapnel. And I should add shrapnel. So the shells break up in these jagged pieces of metal that just rip people apart. 155 millimeter shell will break apart into 1,000 pieces. That just cuts heads off, cuts arms off. It's actually named after a guy. It's a Colonel Harry Shrapnel. That is a real person who went to design shells. I'm not making that up. I know that sounds made up. It's not. It's what does shrapnel even mean? But the ship, oh, so tomorrow we finish this? Go to war? Huh? I better shut this off. Everyone say goodbye. Bye. That was no emotion at all.